Ladies and gentlemen, there is a weight that no scale can measure, a burden that no amount of strength can lift. It does not rest on your shoulders, nor is it counted in kilograms or pounds. It is invisible, yet it presses down relentlessly. It is the weight of unspoken words, unresolved emotions, lingering regrets, fears that never dissipate, and attachments that refuse to release you. Every day we accumulate these invisible stones, memories, expectations, grudges, and doubts, and we carry them as if they are indispensable. Over time, they begin to anchor the mind, the heart, and even the body, making every movement, every decision, every breath heavier than it needs to be. This weight is not caused by the world. It is caused by what we refuse to let go of. Most people do not recognize this burden until it has become unbearable. It creeps in quietly, in the form of anxiety that lingers without cause, in anger that flares unexpectedly, in sadness that refuses to leave. We tell ourselves we are strong enough to bear it, that it is necessary, that it defines who we are. But holding on does not protect you. Holding on does not strengthen you. Holding on chains you to the past and keeps you from living fully in the present. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. To lighten the load, you must first see it clearly. You must notice the thoughts, the patterns, and the emotions that weigh you down, the regrets that replay endlessly in your mind, the anger you clutch tightly as if it were a shield, the fears that whisper constantly, convincing you to remain small, to avoid risk, to postpone living until the right moment. Awareness is not judgment, it is the act of seeing without denial. It is shining a light on what has been hidden, recognizing how much energy has been consumed by what no longer serves you, and understanding that the very things you cling to may be the chains that hold you captive. Letting go is not losing. Releasing what is heavy does not mean abandoning love, responsibility, or memory. It means creating space for clarity, for joy, for growth, and for peace. Imagine a room cluttered with unnecessary objects, each one restricting movement, limiting light, and making every step difficult. Removing the clutter does not take away the room, it reveals its potential. Letting go works the same way for the mind and heart. When you release attachment to outcomes, resentment toward others, and fear of the unknown, you are not losing, you are freeing yourself to live without burden, to move without obstruction, and to breathe without restriction. Attachment is the source of suffering. When we cling to people, to possessions, to expectations, or to past mistakes, we create an invisible cage. We invest our happiness in things that are impermanent, leaving ourselves vulnerable to loss, disappointment, and pain. Relationships falter, circumstances shift, and life changes, yet the mind refuses to accept impermanence. The suffering arises not from what is outside, but from the insistence that life conform to our desires. When we loosen the grip, we allow life to flow naturally, and in that flow comes freedom, resilience, and peace. Simplicity brings strength. The heavier the mind, the less energy remains for clarity and action. When we simplify, when we remove unnecessary attachments, distractions, and mental clutter, we reclaim our energy and focus. Strength emerges not from accumulation but from clarity, from the ability to see what is essential and act without distraction. A simple mind and heart are powerful because they can engage fully with life, respond with wisdom rather than reaction, and navigate challenges with composure. Transformation requires courage. Letting go, simplifying, and releasing attachments is not easy. It asks that you face fear, uncertainty, and discomfort. It demands the courage to confront the familiar patterns that have defined you, to release the safety of habit, and to step into the unknown. Every act of release is a courageous choice to prioritize freedom, clarity, and peace over fear, control, or attachment. Transformation is not instant. It is a journey of persistent awareness, deliberate action, and the continual willingness to choose lightness over weight. The heaviest burdens are never external. They are carried within the mind and heart, often unnoticed until their weight becomes undeniable. The invisible stones you carry, grudges, fear, regret, attachment, do not protect you. They slow you down, cloud your clarity, drain your energy, and diminish your capacity to live fully. The moment you recognize them, the moment you become aware of what is holding you back, you have the power to release them. The act of letting go is the act of reclaiming your life, your freedom, and your peace. Today, Ask yourself, what am I holding on to that no longer serves me? What anger, fear, regret, or attachment is keeping me heavy? What stones in my backpack have been carried far too long? Identify them, acknowledge them, and release them. Let them go gently, without judgment, without resistance, with the awareness that you are not losing yourself. You are liberating yourself. Every moment spent clinging to what is past or unnecessary is a moment of life wasted carrying weight that is not yours to bear. Every choice to release, to simplify, to transform is a step toward lightness, presence, and freedom. The call to freedom is urgent because life does not pause. Time moves relentlessly forward. Opportunities, moments, and relationships will not wait for you to release what holds you down. The energy you reclaim through letting go is the energy you need to live fully, to breathe deeply, and to engage completely with the life that is unfolding before you. The mind, heart, and body are capable of immense strength, clarity, and peace, but only when they are not burdened by unnecessary weight. Let go before it is too late. The choice to release, to simplify, to transform, and to step lightly into life is yours to make, and it begins now. The weight that truly matters is often invisible. It is not the load we carry on our shoulders, nor the backpacks of material possessions that we lug through life. It is something far subtler, far more pervasive, and far more exhausting: the inner weight. This is the burden of unresolved emotions, lingering regrets, unspoken words, and unhealed wounds. It is the accumulation of mental clutter, the constant replay of past mistakes, and the obsessive worry about what may or may not happen in the future. Unlike physical weight, it cannot be measured by a scale, nor can it be lifted with exercise or brute strength. Its presence is felt not in the arms or legs, but in the mind, the chest, and the spirit. It settles quietly, invisibly, yet it slows you down in ways that are profound. People often fail to recognize this heaviness because it does not announce itself. It creeps in gradually, settling like dust in the corners of the mind, until one day it becomes impossible to ignore. You notice it in the fatigue that no amount of sleep can erase, in the tension that tightens your chest without reason, in the unease that gnaws at your joy. You notice it in the way small setbacks feel monumental, in the way minor irritations trigger disproportionate reactions, in the way happiness feels always just out of reach. This inner weight is carried in layers. There is the weight of attachment, the heavy burden of clinging to people, possessions, and ideas. There is the weight of regret, the invisible chains of things left undone and mistakes repeated over and over in the mind. There is the weight of resentment, grudges held against others or even oneself, like stones in the heart that refuse to dissolve. There is the weight of expectation, the pressure to meet standards set by the world, by others, or even by ourselves, that leaves little room to breathe. And there is the weight of fear, the silent, insidious anchor that convinces you to stay small, to avoid risk, to postpone living fully until the perfect moment that never arrives. The paradox of this weight is that it is both real and illusory. It exists because we allow it to exist, and yet we treat it as though it is an immutable fact of life. We clutch it as if holding on to it will somehow protect us, preserve us, or prepare us. In truth, holding on only increases the pressure, the strain, and the tension. Just as a backpack filled with stones becomes unbearable when carried for too long, the mind and heart burdened by unresolved emotions, grudges, and fears begin to ache, to collapse under their own heaviness. The weight affects every aspect of life. Decisions become harder because the mind is crowded with doubt. Relationships become strained because patience and compassion are depleted by internal tension. Joy becomes muted because the capacity to experience it fully is buried beneath layers of unresolved mental clutter. Energy is sapped because every thought and emotion is a small tug, pulling in different directions, draining vitality without notice. People often mistake the signs of inner heaviness for external circumstances. They believe it is the workload, the family responsibilities, the financial pressures, or the world's chaos that exhausts them. These are certainly factors, but the underlying reason why they feel so heavy is the accumulation of inner weight that has been ignored for too long. Awareness is the key. To recognize this weight is to take the first step toward freedom. It requires honest introspection, the courage to examine one's own mind without denial, the willingness to confront the parts of oneself that have been buried or neglected. It requires noticing the recurring patterns of thought, the grudges that are replayed, the fears that prevent action, the regrets that haunt the quiet moments. And once these burdens are recognized, the next step is to release them. Letting go is not easy, because the inner weight has a strange familiarity. We have carried it for so long that it feels like a part of us, as if releasing it would leave us incomplete. But in reality, the opposite is true. Releasing the inner weight is not losing anything essential. It is reclaiming space, clarity, and energy that has been occupied by unnecessary heaviness. It is making room for presence, for joy, for creativity, for freedom. The act of letting go is an ongoing process because the mind is conditioned to cling, to resist, and to replay old patterns. Each moment of awareness, each decision to release resentment, fear, or regret is a small but powerful step toward lightness. Over time, these incremental releases accumulate. The mind becomes quieter, the heart more open, the body more relaxed. The energy that was once drained by carrying invisible burdens is restored to living fully, engaging deeply, and acting with clarity. This inner work is invisible to the outside world, yet it transforms every aspect of life. Choices are made with clarity rather than fear. Relationships are approached with compassion rather than expectation. Work and creativity are pursued with focus rather than distraction. Even the simplest experiences are felt more fully because the mind is not cluttered with unneeded weight. The journey toward lightness requires patience and persistence. The weight may return as old patterns resurface or new challenges arise, but with continued awareness and the willingness to release, the overall heaviness can be steadily diminished. One begins to understand that life does not need to be carried as a burden. Freedom is not in acquiring more, controlling more, or achieving more, but in releasing, letting go, and allowing the natural flow of life to move through without obstruction. This understanding shifts perception. The world itself may not change, but the way it is experienced becomes lighter. A day that once felt exhausting now feels manageable. Problems are faced with resilience rather than dread. Moments of joy are no longer interrupted by the weight of old stories. Even the body reflects the difference. As tension eases, breathing deepens, and posture straightens. The inner weight that once dominated the mind loses its grip, gradually replaced by clarity, presence, and peace. And yet, even with progress, the mind requires continual attention. The practice of noticing, releasing, and choosing lightness becomes a lifelong endeavor, because the nature of life is impermanence and change. Each new experience, each unexpected challenge, brings the potential to accumulate new weight, and each time, the choice remains to recognize it, to let it go, to live unburdened. Those who cultivate this awareness begin to understand that the heaviest burdens are never external, and the lightest freedom is never found in circumstances, possessions, or the opinions of others. It resides entirely within the ability to perceive the weight, confront it honestly, and release it willingly, moment by moment, thought by thought, emotion by emotion, until the mind and heart are light enough to soar freely. Freedom is not something that is given, it is something that is discovered. And the first step toward that discovery is awareness. Awareness is the quiet, steady recognition of what is happening within and around you. It is the moment when you pause long enough to see your thoughts, emotions, and patterns clearly, without judgment or distraction. Without awareness, life flows by unnoticed, and the mind carries burdens without understanding their origin or impact. Most people live in a haze, reacting automatically to circumstances, replaying old habits, and carrying invisible weights from the past. They assume that the way they feel, the way they think, and the way they act are simply the natural state of life, when in truth, much of it is conditioned, habitual, and unconscious. Awareness is the act of shining a light into the corners of the mind that have been neglected, ignored, or avoided. It is noticing the repetitive loops of worry, the judgments cast upon oneself and others, and the subtle ways fear dictates choices and behaviors. Often, the mind is so busy generating narratives that it never stops to observe those narratives. Awareness interrupts this automatic cycle. It does not fight it or try to control it. It simply observes it like a witness to the ongoing drama of thought and emotion. In that observation lies the beginning of freedom, because you cannot change what you cannot see. When a person becomes aware, they begin to notice the difference between what is real and what is a projection of the mind. They begin to see the stories they have been telling themselves, the assumptions that have guided their actions, and the invisible weights they have been carrying. These weights may take many forms: fear of failure, attachment to the past, resentment toward others, unhealed trauma, or limiting beliefs that have been accepted as truths. Without awareness, these weights remain hidden, yet their influence is profound. They affect decisions, shape perceptions, and drain energy without the person even realizing it. Awareness brings clarity. It allows the individual to distinguish between what is essential and what is superfluous. It reveals which thoughts and emotions are helpful and which are harmful. By recognizing these patterns, a person gains the ability to respond rather than react, to act from choice rather than from unconscious conditioning. Awareness is not a one-time realization but an ongoing practice. It is cultivated through attention, reflection, and mindfulness. It requires slowing down in a world that constantly encourages speed and distraction. It asks that you notice your breathing, your posture, your habitual reactions, and the subtle emotions that ripple through your consciousness. Each moment of recognition, no matter how small, strengthens the capacity for freedom. The more aware you become, the more capable you are of seeing the chains that bind you. Some of these chains are obvious, such as addictions, toxic relationships, or destructive behaviors. Others are subtle, hidden beneath layers of rationalization, denial, or societal conditioning. Awareness uncovers them all, and in doing so, creates the possibility of choice. When you are aware, you can see clearly the impact of your thoughts on your emotions, the influence of your emotions on your actions, and the ripple effect that your actions have on your life and the lives of others. You begin to notice that much of your suffering arises not from external circumstances, but from the way you interpret and attach to them. Awareness allows you to step back from the immediacy of these reactions and observe them without being consumed. This distance is critical because it creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, there is the freedom to act consciously, to release what no longer serves you, and to choose a path that aligns with your true intentions rather than conditioned patterns. Awareness also fosters self-compassion. By observing your mind and emotions without harsh judgment, you begin to treat yourself with kindness rather than criticism. You recognize that mistakes are part of learning, that emotions are signals rather than threats, and that growth arises not from perfection, but from understanding and acceptance. In this way, awareness softens the internal struggle, reduces internal conflict, and allows the mind to function with greater clarity and ease. It transforms the experience of life from one of unconscious reaction to one of conscious engagement. Awareness is the foundation for all other forms of freedom. Without it, any attempt to change behavior, heal emotional wounds, or cultivate peace is superficial, because the underlying patterns remain unseen. With awareness, however, the individual gains insight into the workings of the mind, the roots of suffering, and the possibilities for liberation. It is the lens through which the mind sees itself, the key that unlocks the door to conscious living, and the spark that ignites transformation. Through consistent practice, awareness expands, touching every aspect of life. Daily routines, relationships, work, and leisure become opportunities for reflection and presence rather than automatic repetition. Even ordinary moments, when observed fully, reveal depth, richness, and clarity that were previously unnoticed. This attentiveness gradually reshapes perception, reduces attachment, and diminishes the influence of fear and ego. In essence, awareness is the starting point for freedom because it illuminates what has been hidden, clarifies what has been confusing, and exposes what has been limiting. Only when you see clearly can you begin to act intentionally, release unnecessary burdens, and move toward a life that is unbound, unencumbered, and aligned with your deepest truth. Letting go is often misunderstood as loss. People fear it because they believe that releasing something means giving up, abandoning, or admitting defeat. They cling tightly to relationships, memories, habits, or ideas because they feel that holding on preserves control, safety, or identity. Yet the truth is the opposite. Letting go is not losing, it is creating space. It is the deliberate act of freeing oneself from what no longer serves, so that life can be experienced with clarity, energy, and openness. When a person clings to the past, the mind and heart are crowded, leaving no room for the present to flourish. Memories, regrets, and unfulfilled expectations can occupy the mind like furniture in a small room, so much that there is no space to move, breathe, or think freely. Letting go is like removing that excess clutter. It does not erase what has happened, nor does it deny the significance of experiences. Instead, it acknowledges their existence, learns from them, and then allows them to rest without holding them hostage. In relationships, letting go is particularly challenging. People often remain attached to connections that have shifted, evolved, or ended because they fear the emptiness that might follow. They hold on to resentment, anger, or disappointment, thinking that maintaining these feelings keeps them safe or justified. But in reality, this attachment is a weight, a chain that limits growth and prevents emotional freedom. When one releases these emotional bonds, space is created, not only to heal but to invite understanding, peace, and even new forms of connection. Letting go requires discernment. It is not a blind abandonment of responsibility or care. It is a conscious decision to no longer be consumed by something that drains energy or limits growth. It is a recognition that the mind and heart are not meant to carry the past indefinitely. Every thought, every emotion, every attachment occupies space in consciousness. By letting go, that space becomes available for creativity, clarity, and presence. The physical world offers an analogy. Consider a cluttered room. Each object that is unnecessary takes up space, restricting movement, creating discomfort, and reducing efficiency. When the clutter is removed, the room feels larger, lighter, and more functional. The same principle applies to the mind and heart. Releasing attachments, grudges, and unnecessary thoughts creates a mental and emotional environment that allows life to flow more smoothly, decisions to be made with clarity, and experiences to be embraced fully. Letting go also fosters growth. When the mind is cluttered with old grievances or unneeded expectations, there is little room for learning, transformation, or new perspectives. By consciously releasing what is no longer necessary, the individual opens the door to new ideas, opportunities, and experiences that may have been previously overlooked. It is a cultivation of receptivity, a willingness to receive life rather than constantly resisting or clinging. The fear of letting go often stems from a misunderstanding of identity. People believe that what they hold on to defines them. Their failures, their successes, their past relationships, or their possessions. Yet identity is not fixed, and it does not require constant reinforcement through attachment. In fact, true strength and authenticity arise when one is able to release what is no longer relevant and live in alignment with the present. Letting go is also intimately connected to forgiveness. To release resentment or anger towards someone, including oneself, is to create space in the heart. Forgiveness is not about condoning wrongdoing. It is about acknowledging the reality, understanding the limitations, and choosing freedom over continued suffering. When the heart is no longer weighed down by bitterness or blame, it becomes lighter, more open, and capable of genuine compassion. Practicing letting go is a continual process. Life constantly presents new situations, challenges, and attachments. Each time, the choice arises to hold on and carry the weight, or to release and create space. With awareness and practice, letting go becomes a habit, a natural response rather than a painful effort. Over time, the accumulation of these conscious releases transforms perception. The mind feels clearer, decisions become less entangled in fear or attachment, and the heart experiences a sense of expansiveness that was previously unavailable. Letting go is also deeply connected to presence. When the mind is freed from the clutter of the past or anxiety about the future, it can engage fully with the now. Space is created not just for relief, but for deeper awareness, joy, and connection. One begins to notice subtle details, appreciate moments more fully, and respond rather than react to life's events. Ultimately, letting go is an act of courage and wisdom. It requires confronting fear, uncertainty, and sometimes grief. It is a conscious choice to prioritize well-being, clarity, and openness over comfort, habit, or attachment. It is a reminder that freedom and peace are cultivated from within, and that the act of release is a powerful tool for creating a life that is uncluttered, light, and expansive. Each time one chooses to let go, a new space emerges. Space for understanding, growth, love, creativity, and the fullness of living without unnecessary weight. The practice of letting go teaches that what is released is not lost, but transformed into energy that can flow into new possibilities, experiences, and states of being, allowing the individual to navigate life with greater ease, flexibility, and joy. Attachment is one of the most profound sources of human suffering, yet it is often overlooked because it masquerades as love, security, or identity. From an early age, people are taught to cling to possessions, to relationships, to achievements, to ideas of who they are or should be. These attachments can appear comforting, like anchors in a turbulent world, but they are also chains that bind the mind and heart. They create expectations, dependencies, and vulnerabilities that magnify pain when circumstances inevitably change. Everything in life is impermanent. People age, circumstances shift, relationships evolve or dissolve, and material possessions degrade or vanish. Yet when the mind clings tightly, it resists this natural flow, seeking permanence in what is inherently transient. This resistance is the root of suffering. The more one clings, the more one is subject to disappointment, frustration, and loss. Even positive experiences, when clung to, carry the seed of suffering, because the mind fears their disappearance or decline. In relationships, attachment manifests in subtle ways. People attach not only to the presence of others, but also to their approval, validation, and predictable behavior. When the other person changes, becomes unavailable, or acts differently from expectation, the attachment triggers emotional turbulence, anger, fear, jealousy, or sadness. The suffering is not caused by the other person's actions alone, but by the mind's insistence on holding tightly, refusing to accept change, and demanding permanence in what is impermanent. Similarly, attachment to material possessions creates a sense of security that is ultimately fragile. People believe that wealth, status, or objects define their happiness and safety. When these external anchors shift, are lost, or fail to satisfy, the resulting suffering is immense because identity and security were tied to them. The irony is that the more one relies on attachments for stability, the less stable one becomes. Attachment is also internal. People cling to beliefs about themselves, their abilities, their past, or their future. They identify with successes or failures, labeling themselves as good or bad, capable or inadequate, and refuse to release these rigid notions. This mental attachment narrows perception, limits flexibility, and heightens vulnerability to disappointment when reality does not conform to expectation. The mind becomes a prison, and suffering becomes constant because it is fueled by the insistence that the world align with the self's desires and constructs. Attachment intensifies fear. Fear and attachment are inseparable companions. When the mind clings to something, it simultaneously fears losing it. Fear magnifies suffering because it anticipates harm or absence before it occurs, creating tension and anxiety in the present moment. Even when the desired object, person, or situation is present, the fear of its potential loss diminishes enjoyment and peace. Attachment also obstructs growth. When a person clings to familiar ways of thinking, known relationships, or habitual patterns, it becomes difficult to adapt, learn, or embrace new opportunities. The mind prefers security and familiarity, even if it is uncomfortable, over the uncertainty of change. In doing so, attachment limits potential and prolongs suffering, because it binds the individual to what is no longer serving them. Letting go of attachment does not imply indifference or abandonment. It is not the denial of love, care, or responsibility. Rather, it is the conscious choice to experience fully without clinging, to engage with the present moment while understanding the impermanence of all things. When attachment is loosened, joy becomes deeper, sorrow becomes less consuming, and freedom emerges. One begins to realize that suffering arises not from the world itself, but from the insistence that the world conform to personal desires, expectations, and rigid notions of permanence. Awareness of attachment allows for conscious choice. Instead of being swept away by compulsive desire or fear of loss, the mind observes the patterns of clinging, the ways it creates suffering, and the habitual reactions it triggers. This observation opens the possibility of responding with clarity, releasing unnecessary burdens, and embracing life with openness and equanimity. Attachment also distorts perception. When clinging dominates the mind, experiences are filtered through desire and fear. Reality is not seen as it is seen as a reflection of what the mind wants or fears. This distortion intensifies suffering, because it multiplies imagined threats and diminishes appreciation of what is genuinely present. Understanding the link between attachment and suffering is the beginning of liberation. As awareness grows, the mind can differentiate between healthy engagement and clinging. One can love without possessiveness, pursue goals without obsession, and invest in relationships without dependency. Space emerges in the heart and mind, allowing life to be experienced more fully and authentically. In practical terms, reducing attachment involves observing desires and expectations, practicing acceptance of impermanence, and cultivating inner stability that is not dependent on external factors. It requires courage to face the discomfort of releasing control and the unknown of life's natural flow. Yet in doing so, suffering diminishes, clarity increases, and the capacity for peace, joy, and freedom expands. Every attachment loosened creates a subtle shift, a lightness of mind, a relief in the heart, a capacity to be present that was previously restricted. The process is continuous because life constantly presents new opportunities for attachment, yet each conscious release strengthens resilience and deepens understanding. In this way, attachment is both a teacher and a barrier, showing where suffering arises while also offering the possibility of freedom through mindful release and conscious awareness. Simplicity is often mistaken for weakness or a lack of sophistication, yet it is one of the most profound sources of strength. In a world that celebrates complexity, multitasking, and constant stimulation, simplicity is a radical act. It is the deliberate choice to focus on what is essential, to remove distractions, and to live with clarity and purpose. Strength does not always come from accumulation or effort alone. It often arises from the ability to simplify, to distill life into what truly matters, and to act with precision and presence. When the mind is cluttered with unnecessary thoughts, obligations, and attachments, energy is dispersed, attention is fragmented, and decisions become clouded. Complexity multiplies stress because every added layer demands mental, emotional, and physical resources. The mind is pulled in multiple directions, and the heart becomes heavy with competing desires and responsibilities. Simplicity, on the other hand, brings focus. By choosing to engage only with what is essential, the individual frees up mental space and energy. This does not mean abandoning responsibility or ignoring opportunities. It means prioritizing wisely and letting go of what distracts or diminishes clarity. In simplicity, there is elegance of thought, decisiveness of action, and resilience in the face of challenges. The strongest people are often those who have mastered the art of simplicity. They do not scatter themselves in endless pursuits, nor are they enslaved by the constant accumulation of possessions, achievements, or recognition. Instead, they concentrate on what is meaningful, act with intention, and navigate life with a clear mind and steady heart. Simplicity also strengthens relationships. When communication is clear, direct, and honest, connections become more authentic. Overcomplication in relationships, through unspoken expectations, misunderstandings, or unnecessary drama, creates tension and diminishes trust. By simplifying interactions, by removing assumptions and clarifying intentions, relationships become stronger, deeper, and more resilient. Simplicity is not just external, it is internal as well. The mind often seeks complexity, constructing elaborate narratives, analyzing endlessly, or holding on to what is unnecessary. Each thought and worry consumes energy and creates internal noise. The practice of simplicity involves noticing these mental patterns, discerning what is essential, and letting go of the rest. It is a form of mental hygiene that restores clarity, focus, and peace. In the pursuit of goals, simplicity brings efficiency. When the mind is clear and the path is uncluttered, action becomes direct and purposeful. Instead of being pulled in countless directions, energy flows to what matters most, producing results that are both effective and sustainable. The strength derived from simplicity is subtle but profound. It is not always visible to the outside world, because it does not rely on showiness, complexity, or external validation. It is an inner power that manifests as calm decisiveness, resilient focus, and the ability to act without distraction or hesitation. Simplifying life also cultivates presence. When the mind is not entangled in unnecessary complexity, It can fully engage with the present moment. Experiences are no longer filtered through layers of worry, expectation, or distraction. Simple moments become rich and meaningful, and the individual gains access to insights and clarity that are often hidden in the chaos of overcomplication. Simplicity requires courage because it demands letting go of the habitual need for more things, more achievements, more approval. It requires the willingness to resist societal pressures that equate business with success and complexity with sophistication. Choosing simplicity is a conscious act of strength, a decision to prioritize what matters and release what does not. In nature, simplicity is the source of resilience. Trees do not carry extra branches unnecessarily, rivers flow along the most efficient path, and animals expend energy only where it is needed. There is a lesson in observing this natural simplicity. Energy conserved and directed wisely becomes strength, clarity, and endurance. Practicing simplicity also reduces suffering. Complexity often breeds confusion, frustration, and overwhelm. When life is simplified, when commitments, thoughts, and attachments are consciously chosen, the mind experiences less tension, the heart feels lighter, and decision-making becomes more intuitive and less burdened by competing demands. Strength cultivated through simplicity is sustainable. It does not rely on external circumstances, resources, or recognition. It arises from the clarity of purpose, the focus of attention, and the ability to act without unnecessary distraction. It is a quiet but powerful force that enables resilience, adaptability, and groundedness in the face of life's uncertainties. Over time, simplicity becomes a habit, a lens through which the world is perceived, and a guide for action. It teaches that less can be more, that clarity is more powerful than confusion, and that freedom emerges when unnecessary burdens are removed. By embracing simplicity, the individual taps into a deep well of strength, clarity, and presence that allows life to be navigated with intention, calmness, and effectiveness. Transformation is never effortless. It is not a gentle breeze that shifts circumstances, nor a passive wish for things to change. True transformation requires courage, a willingness to step into the unknown, to confront discomfort, and to challenge the familiar patterns that have defined life up to this point. Change is inherently unsettling because it disrupts routines, expectations, and the sense of security that comes from familiarity. The mind resists it instinctively, clinging to what is known, even when that familiarity causes suffering or limits growth. Courage, then, is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Transformation asks individuals to look honestly at themselves, to recognize habits, beliefs, and attachments that no longer serve, and to face the parts of life they have long ignored or avoided. This honesty is often painful because it reveals vulnerabilities, mistakes, and limitations that are uncomfortable to acknowledge. Yet it is precisely this confrontation that opens the door to change. Without courage, insight remains theoretical, and life continues in repetition, constrained by the invisible walls of fear, habit, and resistance. Transformation demands action, not mere reflection. Awareness alone is insufficient. Insight without implementation does not shift reality. The courage to transform manifests as concrete steps, releasing old attachments, altering ingrained behaviors, facing difficult conversations, embracing unfamiliar opportunities, and committing to personal growth even when outcomes are uncertain. Every step forward requires risk, because transformation challenges the status quo and ventures beyond the comfort zone. Fear will always accompany this process. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss, and fear of the unknown all rise naturally when one attempts to change. Courage does not eliminate these fears, it acknowledges them and chooses to move forward anyway. In this way, transformation is both a test and a teacher, strengthening resilience, patience, and perseverance. Often, transformation is gradual, occurring in small, persistent shifts rather than dramatic, immediate change. Courage is required not just in decisive moments, but in the quiet persistence of daily effort, the commitment to new habits, the choice to release limiting thoughts, and the repeated decision to step into uncertainty. Each small act of courage compounds over time, producing profound internal change that eventually manifests externally in life circumstances, relationships, and personal fulfillment. Transformation also involves vulnerability. To change deeply, one must let go of pretense, ego, driven narratives, and the desire to appear secure or perfect. Vulnerability is often uncomfortable because it exposes the inner self to scrutiny, to doubt, and even to failure. Courage allows one to embrace vulnerability as a necessary pathway for growth, recognizing that authentic transformation cannot occur behind walls of defense or avoidance. Another essential aspect of transformation is the willingness to face discomfort directly. Personal growth requires challenging long-held beliefs, confronting emotions that have been suppressed, and engaging with aspects of life that provoke fear or resistance. It is not a process of avoidance or gradual erosion, but of deliberate confrontation, guided by courage. Transformation reshapes identity. The person who begins this journey cannot remain entirely the same because growth necessitates adaptation, learning, and evolution. Courage enables the release of old self-concepts, attachments, and roles, making space for a version of oneself that is freer, more conscious, and more aligned with authentic purpose. Resistance is natural because transformation threatens old structures, both internal and external. People often cling to identity, routines, relationships, and familiar patterns because they provide a sense of stability, even when that stability is limiting. Courage is required to loosen these attachments, to accept uncertainty, and to embrace the possibility of discomfort for the sake of meaningful change. Support and patience are allies of courage in transformation. While the journey is deeply personal, external guidance, reflection, and practices that cultivate awareness and resilience enhance the capacity to face fear. At the same time, patience allows the individual to recognize that transformation is a process, not an instant achievement. Each courageous choice builds momentum, creating a chain of actions that gradually reshape life and consciousness. Transformation ultimately opens the mind and heart to possibilities that were previously unimaginable. It fosters adaptability, creativity, and insight. Courage allows the individual to move from reaction to intentionality, from limitation to expansion, and from fear-driven patterns to conscious engagement with life. Through courage, transformation becomes a pathway not only to external change, but to inner liberation, clarity, and resilience. It teaches that fear is a companion, not a barrier, and that the act of stepping forward despite uncertainty is the very essence of growth and freedom. Every transformation, whether in thought, emotion, habit, or circumstance, relies on the consistent willingness to confront the unknown, release what is no longer necessary, and embrace the unfolding journey with intentionality, presence, and bravery.